Welcome to Living the Empowered Life podcast. My name is Yvonne. This is episode 18 of the podcast. And today I have a very special guest joining me on the podcast. She's my first guest, actually, my first guest interview. As you know, all the other episodes, I have done them by myself, just talking about a variety of subjects. And if you haven't subscribed to the podcast, please subscribe and follow me so that you can get the bi-weekly episode notifications. But as I said, I've invited my friend Andrena Palmer onto the podcast today. You know, many people, including myself, transition into our purpose and calling later on in life. This is usually after having many different jobs and careers. And that is why I've invited Andrena onto the podcast today, because her story is really inspirational. And, you know, I just want to tell you a little bit about her background, and I'm sure she's going to fill in the blanks where I've probably missed something, because I know I probably will. But she's a pioneer evangelist at a church army missional community. And their aim is to introduce Jesus to everyone, everywhere. I'm looking forward to hearing more about that. She's truly walking and working in her purpose and calling. So we're just going to have a chat about her journey so far, career-wise, transitioning from career and jobs into vocational purpose and calling. Welcome, Andrena.
Hi, Yvonne. Thank you for inviting me here. And it's wonderful to be here as part of this podcast. Well done for all that you do.
Thank you so much, Andrena. And Andrena and I go back quite a long way, maybe back to about 2003.
Gosh, yes. We've been friends for an awfully long time.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful that we've seen each other transition and to find, you know, what God has got for us.
Yeah.
He comes to us at different times. So it's really good that
Yeah.
we've been able to do that.
Yeah.
My journey starts with uni back in 1995. I went to university in Bristol and I started off doing a computing degree because that's what everybody did. Everybody did computing degrees.
Did they?
Everybody, absolutely. It was the thing to do in the mid-90s. Me and computing, not quite the right fit. I changed majors and graduated in business information systems in the end. But I really wanted a job that was big and important.
Wow.
I think it's a height thing. I'm 5 foot nothing. I've always wanted something that people will have to look up to me in. So I went into retail management. And then when we met, I'd gone into banking. So we met in our banking careers.
That's
and
right.
In retail management, again, it was about being important, being in charge, making those decisions.
Could I ask you a question at this point?
Absolutely.
As well? You mentioned that obviously when you went into doing your degree, it was in computers and stuff. So when you were back at school, you'd gone college and everything, did you have an idea in mind then what you wanted to do?
I had lots of dreams. I had lots of visions about things that I wanted to do. I liked the idea of teaching.
Okay.
But when I looked at what was available in terms of jobs, there were so many computing jobs out there that I figured that my best chance of getting good quality employment would be in computing. But thank goodness we have second and third and fourth chances.
Exactly. Amen to that. And you mentioned then that halfway through your major you switched to business studies. So then what kind of inspired that change from computing to business studies? So what kind of made that jump then to that?
Done business studies as part of my sixth form. So it was quite a good idea to transition to music, to business studies. Unfortunately, I had a difficult time in my second year at university. I became ill. I got shingles. And that really did attack my nerve system. And being a studious person, I wanted to carry on and go back to uni. And I got up and moved a little bit too quickly. And then I got knocked back and I ended up with chronic fatigue. Okay. So after being diagnosed with chronic fatigue, I was actually out of university for 2 years, recovering learning to, get my brain back in gear. And then I went back and finished the degree that I went back to the university, but the degree that I'd started was no longer available to me.
Okay.
So I had to pick and choose different modules from different subjects that didn't have the prerequisites, so that I could go back and do the final year. So although I don't have a named degree, the majority of the lessons were from the business information systems stream.
Okay.
So I do have a degree majoring in business information systems, which took me 6 years because I had 2 years out with ill health.
Wow. So it seems like you went on a bit of journey even to complete your degree, obviously with ill health because of shingles and everything. So once you completed your degree and you've come out of it now, you're out of, your first cycle of doing education. Obviously you had your school, your college, your uni, had a bit of a break, came back, completed your degree, passed your exam. What was your first job then out of that?
So I went into retail management, and I managed floors and stores for different stores throughout the Bristol area. I moved to Leeds and managed a floor in a department store there. I moved back to London and did that there. And then you and I met when I transitioned into banking.
Yeah.
So we met, early 2000s.
Yeah, I would say it was about probably 2002, 2003.
Back then, yes, I was, again, banking, trying to be something that I really wasn't. And again, like with the computing degree, this didn't fit. And
was you happy?
It wasn't about being happy. It was about doing what I had to do to be important.
Okay.
And then I realized, no, I wasn't. I wasn't happy because I wasn't doing what I should be doing.
So we were talking about your retail jobs, and you were saying that you weren't happy in your retail jobs because you felt that you weren't doing what you were supposed to be doing. Yep. So how long were you at Halifax Bank? Was that your last kind of career job, or did you have another career job after Halifax?
So once I'd left the bank, I went back into retail, and I went and worked for the biggest toy store in London. And it was absolutely amazing. I still say the best job I ever had, because you can be as frustrated as you like, and then you're going to build Lego and play Monopoly. It was an absolutely magical experience. I loved my time there, but unfortunately it was a recession in 2009, and my position was made redundant.
So if it wasn't for the recession, do you think that you would have stayed on there for a bit longer?
I would have loved to have stayed on. However, a few months before that, Yvonne, if we go back to the September, I had an audible call from God. So I had gone away for a few days, and as part of this, just some time away, some time in the countryside, and I was by a lake and I was looking out, and I actually heard the voice of God that said, "You will work for me with women and children."
Okay. Wow.
Now, not everybody hears that as an audible voice. And working in a toy shop, you work with a lot of women and you're with children every day. But I didn't want to be disobedient. I wanted to listen. Okay, God, I hear you. I believe that this is you. And what I would like to do, God, within the next 6 months, I'd like to come back to this space, and I'd like you to tell me what I'm supposed to do with women and children. So that was September 2008.
So before you got that audible voice from God, did you feel that God was speaking to you in any other way? Or was that the first time this was kind of being brought to your attention by God, that he had something different in store for you?
I always had a strong faith and a good relationship with God, but this was the first audible voice that I've actually heard, and didn't want to be a bit sort of Eli. I wanted to actually acknowledge, I can hear you. I know it's you. I want to do something about it, but I also want to make sure that this is you. So hence why I said, give me 6 months, let me come back, let me see what actually happens. So although I have a faith and have a very strong relationship, and we've all been told no in the past, but this one, with regards to my future, this one I knew I had to take it seriously. January 2009, I was made redundant, and I had a family bereavement. My mum died very unexpectedly and only in her early 50s. So being made redundant, and you just have all the emotions that go with that, being bereaved, all the emotions that go with that. But I also knew that God had this plan for me.
So after your bereavement, January 2009 was this?
Yeah.
You mentioned that you said to God, you'll come back in 6 months.
So I'd said in the September, I said to God, I believe you, I trust you, I know this is you. Can I please come back in 6 months' time and see exactly what this is? And during the next few months, I actually wrote to some of my trusted friends and said, this is what I've heard. Would you please pray for me so I can see what God's saying? At this time, really happy in my retail job, wasn't expecting what happened next. Was not expecting January 2009, where I was made redundant from my position in retail management, and also a family bereavement happened. So after a really suitable time of mourning, and when I went back to look for jobs, I had to think about retail management jobs, but I also started looking at church-based jobs.
After you got made redundant, and obviously you shared that you had a time of bereavement, and reflection to kind of think about things and to mourn and to kind of come to terms, or start the process of coming to terms with your loss. So you mentioned that you started to look for both your secular jobs and also missionary jobs, church jobs. So what was the next job then that came your way?
I got 6 interviews. 3 were retail interviews, 3 were church-based interviews, looking as junior church, Sunday school leaders, church family workers. And I really, again, felt quite special that even though I didn't have the qualifications, this was my first job in ministry, that God had put this in my path and this is what I was meant to do.
So out of those jobs then, you mentioned you had 6 job interviews.
I had 6 job interviews. I got one of those jobs, and that was a church-based job.
But how did you know that was the job you were supposed to pick out of all that? Because that's quite a big selection. How did you know which one to pick then? How did you know to pick the church job?
It was, well, a lot of prayer, but remembering that I'd told God back in September I'd come back to him in 6 months' time. 6 months after that, I wasn't in the right headspace to come back to him. But a couple of months after that, I said, okay, God, if this is you, let's see what happens. But as anybody who's unemployed, you look and you see, you have to look for what is already your calling and what you already do. But I wanted to equal it out. So for every retail job I went for, I also looked for a Christian charity or a church or some way that I could be serving the Lord with women and children, because I knew that this had come from him. I didn't know what it was going to look like, how I was going to do that, if there were even jobs like this available.
Yeah.
But I was very, very pleasantly surprised. And this is now going back to summer 2009.
Let's go back just a second there. Okay, so now you've explained to me, now you've told me that you got your first job out of the 6 jobs, this church job. What was this first church job like for you?
It was a completely different sort of atmosphere.
Yeah.
Anybody who thinks about church jobs imagines people only work on Sundays, but no. There is an absolute load of work. It is not a 9 to 5. So I went from retail, which again isn't a 9 to 5, but I went to a truly round the clock, caring for people, listening to people, encouraging people, cutting out shapes and learning new songs. It was amazing. It was absolutely, absolutely amazing. And during my time there, I was happy. But during my time there in that first job, I knew that I needed to transition again. And I needed to, if I was making a change in career, I needed to top up my qualifications. So I started looking at courses that I could do. And I found a graduate diploma course, Oasis College, with youth work and ministry. So I did a course in youth work and ministry to top up the degree that I already had. And whilst I was doing that, I worked with an Anglican church in South Woodford. When my contract and course finished there, I went on to Orpington, where I was for the next 7 years. And then God starts to nudge you again.
So before we go into the nudging, could we talk a bit about the transition from retail into ministry? You explained that obviously it's not a 9 to 5. Retail wasn't a 9 to 5. Part of your transition was to get another qualification in your vocation. But how about things like mindset? Retail, obviously working in a retail shop, even though both of them working with people, being able to deal with people. But did you notice any other transitions you had to make, not just education wise, but maybe like in your mindset, the way you did things, to kind of go from retail to going to your vocation, even though you were redundant and, you had your interviews and you went that, there must have been some type of shifts that you had to make within yourself.
Absolutely. The whole fast moving consumer goods, pack them high, sell them quick, get everything out there, had to change to let's stop and listen to this person. Let's see how we can help this person.
Yeah.
And let's call on other people who are more experienced than me, who might be able to give me more advice. I didn't have to be the first person that came up with the idea. And very much I understood that I was still learning. I was very new to this as a career. Lots of people who did the college course with me were half my age. And doing this as somebody who was in their 30s, but also as a Black single woman, I found that it was quite difficult. The Anglican Church especially does have a lot of youth workers, but I personally found that what I didn't fit with a lot of the expectations.
So would you say that is would you say then that was one of the challenges then of
that
transitioning?
Was definitely a big challenge when I started to think, am I walking in my purpose? Am I doing everything that God is calling me to do? So as I've got more confident, I can challenge absolutely that now. But I do think that that was and is a barrier. I do, yes.
And in terms of challenges, was there any other challenges that you came across then in your transition from career to calling, to your vocational calling?
The obvious one, Yvonne, is the financial the financial benefit.
Yeah.
When we work for charities and for churches, we don't earn as much money as we would do working with other bigger organizations. The other thing, and this is a really sad thing, but I'm going to have to say it, is working with Christians is not always a bed of roses. Some people have some very strange ideas. Some people don't understand how we can help people and don't want to help people and deliberately want to keep people down.
That's sad.
So it was really hard to think, how are we showing love here in some of the situations that I was in? And I know I am far, far from perfect, but I hope that I showed compassion and love to each young person and family who I ministered to.
So, I mean, that must have been a really difficult challenge. And to hear that, actually, that's quite sad to hear, because at the heart of ministry, in my other work, for those of you who don't know, I have a charity called Daughter Arise. When you're doing ministry work, at the heart of it, it is about connecting with people, showing empathy, compassion, and showing love in action. So I can't imagine how difficult that must have been for you at the time to have to be dealing with that. But you mentioned in your what you just said about how you tried to deal with it from was to just deal with it family by family, one family at a time, showing empathy and compassion.
It's about love, it's about empathy, it's about understanding, it's about boundaries and knowing how much I can do. What can I do? If I don't have the support of the church behind me, what can I do? And whose support can I have?
Before you joined Church Army, and whilst you've been at Church Army, I should say, have you found that the financial challenges have hindered your transition, or in spite of those challenges, you're still able to get on and do the things that you need to do?
I couldn't let that hinder my transition, because I firmly believed and believe that this is what God is calling me to do, and he has put me in these situations. My rent has always been paid. I've always managed to have enough money. And whilst wedding presents sometimes are not on the most expensive part of the list, I can only do what I can afford to do. But I've always had provision from God, provision from my family. It's always worked out for me.
Fantastic. So you were mentioning then about now transitioning into Church Army and being able to minister to young people in your area where you're based. I can see just by looking at your face that I don't even need to ask. That's one of the highlights of
Church Army. I cannot praise Church Army enough. Church Army is a section of the Church of England, but the aim, as we've said already, is for everyone everywhere to experience God's love. So as part of this, I was so fortunate to have been employed as a youth worker with unchurched young people in Hackney, East London. And as part of this, I get to go out. I go to youth clubs, I go to parks, I go to schools, I go to chicken shops, I go anywhere where young people are gathered, and I tell them how much Jesus loves them. And do they all want to hear it? Absolutely not. Do some of them want to hear it? Yeah, absolutely. I try and forge some sort of trust. We run different activities and youth club games, and I go in as a trusted helper. I'm not randomly walking up to many young people on the street and giving out tracts. But I'm a person who will, as part of the session, say, would you like to pray about that? You know, there's a situation like that in the Bible. Have you heard of? And mention the particular character, mention that person. And the aim for me is to show these young people love, to show these young people unconditional love.
So in terms of that, and in terms of showing young people love, I know for you, that's probably something that has been a highlight for you. Is there any other particular, can you kind of share with us maybe one more highlight or one or two more highlights that, you know, you have found from, you know, doing this now job that you're doing as an evangelist with the church army? Can you kind of share one or two more with us, highlights?
I am, again, really blessed. And as part of this journey, I'm on a training course. So I am training to become a commissioned evangelist and to be commissioned by the Church of England. And as part of this, as part of the course, we get to think about the experiences that we currently have and how we can make them better. And it's absolutely wonderful. As part of a team, we run a community cafe. Whilst the weather is so beautiful, we're able to take the chairs and tables outside. We're able to minister to people and say it's free of charge. It is tea and cakes and sandwiches. And it's wonderful. Those people that come in and they are able to actually sit with us, and we are able to talk to them. For some people, they haven't got a chance or people to speak to. So it's absolutely brilliant being able to do that. And another thing that we do, we've recently started a food pantry. We have the help of a lot of other local and national charities. But the way that we do it, it is such a compassionate space. So we say to the guests, here is a list, and you have a choice of maybe 12 to 15 things from the list. And then that helps people. It's not a food bank where you get what you're given. It's a food bank where it's a food pantry where we can say, this is what you have. If you are going to enjoy it and cook with it and try it, then absolutely take it. If it's something that you wouldn't put in your store you wouldn't keep in your store cupboard, it saves it for the next person. And there was a lady who came in. She says, I've got 5 children, primary school and younger. My husband's been out of work for 2 years. Thank you. We were wondering this week what we were going to do about food. And then your flyer came through our door.
Wow, that's amazing. Glory to God. That is absolutely amazing to hear. I mean, just listening to you and just, you know, seeing you talk about the work that you've been doing, you can see that you're something that you really enjoy. The journey obviously has had its ups and downs. But if somebody was to ask you the question and say to you, Andrena, if you could have not gone through the transition later in life and would have started at that stage of maybe leaving sixth form, uni, and then being straight into what you are now, do you think that you would have appreciated the journey, or would you have said, yes, I would have liked to have done that? Or what would your answer be to somebody who would have asked that question to you? Like, all what you're doing now, having that straight out of uni and just being in it, do you think you would have appreciated the journey?
I would not have appreciated it. And I believe that God doesn't make mistakes.
Yeah.
He doesn't do things in our time schedule. He does things in his. And I had to have that idea of wanting to be big and important to come back on that idea. You will work with children, and children are the least of these. But let the children come to me.
Wow.
I had to transition into, you know, I want people to look up to me, I want to look down and help you.
But in a way, you are obviously, maybe the way that you had it back then, maybe was coming from a kind of self-centered place of wanting people to look up to you.
And as I've said before, I make mistakes. We're all human. We all make mistakes.
Yeah.
But I am convinced that I do everything with the help of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
And through God's power. I try my best.
Now that's really powerful. but it's almost like in listening to your story, it's almost like you are doing something big and important, because when you work for Christ, that is the most important thing that you can ever do.
Absolutely.
And
Amen.
it's not from a place where, because I can admit, when I was younger, I mean, I thought I'd be a banker wearing Gucci, this is going back to when I was in care. Obviously, I was very young. I had very different ideas about what I wanted my life to be. But obviously, like you, my transition phase came much later in life. And the things that I thought I'd be doing, that sense of importance, has come through a different way. So, to listen to your story of how you've transitioned, it couldn't have been easy. Even though you love what you do, it couldn't have been easy to have done that. All the challenges that you've kind of explained, and personal tragedy that you've had. If you could name 3 things you personally feel has got you from career to calling, that transition. So obviously we know, to God be the glory, God is the one that has given you the purpose and stuff. But what 3 personal things do you think has helped you to make that kind of transition?
And again, Yvonne, I'm going back to the Bible, 1 Corinthians 13, faith, hope, and love.
Okay.
It was that faith that the audible voice I heard was from God, and that he wasn't going to let me down, and he never, ever has. Hope that I can introduce people to Christ and to meaningful relationships, to be safe, to give the young people somewhere safe that they can be.
Yeah.
And love, when you're trying to explain to people what you do, and you say, I just have to love these children and young people. I have to love them and show them that love. Young people, in my experience, like to be listened to. They like to be taken seriously, and they like to be understood. And it's showing them that love, putting the boundaries in there, being auntie when you have to be, not being a teacher.
Yeah.
But love has overruled all of it.
So love for you has been the main thing that has transitioned you from career to vocational calling.
Absolutely, 100%.
So what advice would you give to those who may be later in life like us, who, I mean, I was about 35 when I started my journey to living the empowered life. You were in your 30s as well. What advice would you give to people who may be at a place where maybe they don't realize it as career to calling? Maybe they realize they've got a purpose and they're not sure what to do. They look on things like bills, family, is it too late for me and stuff like that. What advice would you give to people who were once in that place where we was?
I was able to seek wise counsel. So whilst I had that calling, and whilst I'd said to God, can you give me that 6 months to wrestle with it, I was able to send that information off to wise people and ask them to pray. Some of those people are still walking alongside me today. They're good. Still supporting me and encouraging me and praying for me. And I know that it was the right thing to do. So seeking wise counsel, listening, getting as much experience as you possibly can from others who know and who have done what you're doing. But it's also faith. It's also knowing that if God has brought you to it, he will bring you through it. He's never let me down. He'll never let any of us down. Whilst we don't always get the results that we want, he's still always there. Fantastic. So keep trying, keep trusting, and keep loving.
I think that's really good advice to be giving people as well, just because, sometimes we all need a sounding board to kind of get those kind of thoughts out. Sometimes when they're inside, especially when you're going from transitioning to from something you've always done or known to something new, it can be a little scary. But I think one of the key things as well that I would pick out from what you've said about your own journey is that really at the center, at the forefront of everything anyway, was what God asked you to do, being obedient to God and listening to his voice. Because sometimes you can find, and I found this in a little bit in my experience, is that yes, it's all very well to seek wise counsel. It's great to have people to pray with you, but if those voices take you away from what God's called you to do, that in itself can cause a huge problem, because other people might not have done what you're attempting to do, so they could be speaking from a place of fear for you, or doubt, and that can really interfere with what the calling that God has for your life. But just listening to you and your story, it just becomes very clear that even though you did all these things that you're saying to people that they should do, seeking wise counsel, getting advice, learning from others, you still kept God the center of what you were doing.
Absolutely, 100%.
So, I mean, that is just really great to hear your story, Andrena, going from career to calling. And it's very clear, actually, just from looking in your eyes and hearing you talk and your excitement, that, you know, this is something that I don't even have to say. Do you have any regrets?
Absolutely none. Absolutely none. I am loved and I can show love, and that's all right with me.
Thank you very much, Andrena, for coming on Living the Empowered Life, you know, sharing your story with us about your journey from career to calling. I will definitely be posting this up and asking people to kind of leave some, just, you know, and if they've got any encouragement from this or anything like that. But thank you again for coming on, and we will definitely catch up.
Absolutely. And Yvonne, I want to say loud and clear how proud of you I am. For all that you have achieved, for all that you do to help other people. You are an amazing woman, and I'm very, very proud of you.
Thank you, Andrena. And, you know, to hear your words, I mean, you're my longtime friend, you're a close friend of mine, and you've been on my journey. You have been one of my people that you talk about, the prayer people, you know, you've been with me on my journey, praying for me and encouraging me, and being a cheerleader for me when sometimes I felt, especially with Daughter Arise, you know, the charitable work that I do, that it's been quite difficult. You know, you've always been there for me, and I appreciate you. I love you, and just thank you for everything. And I will catch up with you again soon.
Sister.